Good morning, and thank you for taking the time to listen in what promises to be a very, very engaging chat. The first full-blown webinar in a series, Industry Talk. And before I proceed, please note the hashtag for today's event is hashtag Industry Talk, hashtag CV Magazine. So please spread the word. I am joined by my co-moderator, Bhushan Mahapralkar, editor, CV Magazine. He will be, Bhushan and me have been closely reporting on the trends in the CV and the components industry, respectively, from lockdown 1.0 to lockdown 4.0, and now in the phase unlock 1.0. We are, of course, joined by our expert panelists today. The first one is Mr. V.G. Ramakrishnan, Managing Partner and MD, Avantium Advisors. He's joined by Kaushik Madhavan, VP Mobility at Frost & Sullivan. I'm sure they've attended many webinars this phase of lockdown, and I pretty much call them forensic experts in their field because they've gone in very deep and they know the the impact of every trend that has come up and surprised us in the phase of the lockdown and now the unlock phase. In a short while from now, we'll also be joined by two experts from the private bus and trucks operation side. We have Mr. Prasanna Patwardhan, CMD at Prasanna Purple Mobility Solutions Limited. He's also the president of BOKI. And then we have Mr. Mahendra Arya, National President, All India Transport Welfare Association, closely linked from the truck operations side. They've been together strongly advocating government intervention to help sustain the business in their respective segments. So Bhushan, over to you now. And to the other panelists to begin with, I want to understand which way is the weather vane pointing, which way is the wind blowing?
Thank you, Ashish, for the introduction, and welcome everyone. My first question is, of course, going to be to V.G. Ramakrishnan. I want you to bring us up to speed on what's happening in the CV industry as it comes out of the shadow of the lockdown, and where do you anticipate it's headed?
So Bhushan, if you have to just look at the CV industry currently, I see actually it is in a good zone, and you'll be surprised why I'm saying it's in a good zone. We know that CV industry and economy is very, very closely related, right? And as such, we have seen the economy grow by only about 4% last year. Okay. Over and above that, we've been going through the phase of BS6 transition. So the H1 of 2021 was anyway supposed to be a bad period for the CV industry. Okay. So we knew that this was to be a bad period, and we knew that CV industry would be alone in terms of facing this particular bad period because of industry-specific regulation as well as slow economic growth. What has happened is that with COVID coming in, right, it has become one big wave where entire CV industry's issues have become subsumed by the larger global problems, right? So it is no more the CV industry that needs to go to the government and ask, what is it that you can do for us to revive the trucking industry? Now every government is sitting and figuring out ways to revive a global economy as well as a local economy, right? So it is no more a CV industry problem that it was typically for a 6-month period, but it has become a global problem. So in a way, the CV industry, in my opinion, is a little better off to look at saying that I was alone in facing this problem. Now it has become a global issue, and now the global leaders will work on our behalf to get the industry out of the entire morass that we have slipped in. So on one level, industry-specific issues have become national issues at this point in time. Okay, it's a small solace for the industry because loss of business is loss of business anyway. So what do we do for the next 6 to 8 months to survive this? The only sector, in my opinion, today, or two sectors that have very strong potential growing forward is, one is the supply chain, because the country needs to keep moving in terms of supply chain, and of course the healthcare sector because of the current conditions, right? The only issue is that the additional sales that may come up from new truck demand may not happen, although there is enough liquidity in the system. It's a question of confidence that needs to come back. So obviously we were looking at a 40% down from what it was last year in terms of sales. Last year sales was typically 40% down in terms of M&H CV segment. this year was anyway supposed to be down from that 40%. So the H1, in my opinion, is not going to really be any significant number we're going to talk about. H1 is a washed out, in my opinion. We are going to go back at least 8 to 10 years in terms of the industry going back in terms of volumes. I anticipate 1 to 2 more years of pain going forward. And only then I see revival or going back to certain numbers in terms of demand. And if you also look at it, we were also part of a cyclical demand slowdown in the commercial industry. So I think it's a more or less a perfect storm that one can talk about. And that has led to a situation where the commercial vehicle industry, the only way by which we can bring back the demand in commercial vehicle industry is for government to do a specific 2-3 acts. One could be reduction in GST on commercial vehicles, right? For a very, very small period of time to revive demand. The second part, obviously, is the question of cash for clunker program, which is scrapping of trucks that are older, incentives provided to scrap them and bring in higher tonnage of vehicles into the system. And the third aspect is to ensure that NBFCs are funding the liquidity that has been poured into the system reaches the trucking industry. Because today, I think one of the biggest sectors that needs to keep the engines of economy moving is the trucking industry, right? So I think these are the 3 specific elements that the government can do to revive the trucking industry. Apart from that, if you look at demand, contraction is happening across the industry. So capacity addition is not the real prime requirement. The trucking industry per se is looking at survival at this point in time, right? So it may, and when the demand is contracting, survival is the issue. You don't really require to invest in capacity addition. It can wait. And that is why I said that the next 2 years period, you cannot expect a revival in demand that is going to come through. The fundamental demand will contract for the next couple of months. And next financial year is when the demand will start coming back to the original levels of what it was in 2019-20. So for the next 2 years, it's going to be very tough in terms of how the commercial vehicle industry is going to look at. Truckers per se may not want to add capacity because there is enough capacity in the system. It's a question of utilization of that capacity. So in overall, this is how I see the industry moving forward. Bhushan.
You spoke about challenges, but how do you look at the opportunities? I mean, you say supply chain is an important part of the economy and it is something that will continue to be prioritized. What kind of opportunities do you think should be coming the way of the CV industry, despite whatever hurdles are there in the way?
See, let's be honest about it. Opportunities are going to be very, very far and few in between. For the trucking industry, one area of opportunity that will present itself is the international markets, right? When everybody is wanting to spend as less as possible on a new acquisition, can Indian OEMs or OEMs operating from India can fill that space where you have reasonably priced products for the technology that is being provided at this point in time, right? So the entire Indian trucking industry has moved to BS6, which means you have the technology to operate in most advanced markets. You have truck companies that already have technology on hydrogen. You have technology on LNG, CNG. You have multitude fuels. You have BS3, you have BS4, you have BS6 at this point in time. So you have a multitude range of fuel options with all the OEMs that operate here in India. Now, when the entire world is downgrading in terms of its price points, can Indian suppliers take advantage of that particular positioning that is happening in the next couple of years? When people will definitely want a product but want it at a lower price, can Indian suppliers step up to that opportunity? So that is one clear area of opportunity that I see, right? The second area of opportunity I clearly see is in terms of the disaggregation. One of the trends that we've been talking for a very long time is consolidation in terms of truck demand, right? Organization of truck demand. I think that trend could get reversed in the short period of time. Okay, everybody would want to move to an asset-light model. So the asset-light model could be one of the key trends that we'll be looking at. Even trucking companies today do not have more than 20-30% of the fleet as their own fleet. Rest are all attached fleet, right? that may actually accelerate. In fact, we were thinking that it will consolidate further in terms of own trucks and less of attached trucks. That trend could reverse because of the current situation, because people may not want to have assets. And many of these trucking companies will struggle for cash flow. The biggest lesson that one has learned during this particular period of time is that businesses with high fixed assets and fixed liabilities all have a very, very tough time meeting those fixed commitments. So people who have less fixed overheads are in a better position to survive this downturn, right? So companies with poor cash flows, high fixed costs will all struggle to survive in this downturn, right? So how do we and people who are owning this one or two trucks always find ways to keep their fixed costs low because they are self-operated, they do not have large establishments, etc., etc. So all these fixed costs becomes if you take out all these fixed costs, many of these fixed costs typically do not add value to a consumer, but they remain as fixed costs in the system. And fixed costs over a period of time, as organizations grow, the fixed cost kind of keeps growing disproportionate to the value it provides to the customer in the first place, right? So when that happens, you will have trucking companies will have to cut down on a lot of fixed costs that doesn't add value to the customers. They have to start stripping down all those non-value added costs that are there as part of the system. And that is where I believe that smaller operators who have less fixed costs, have their own ability to manage things, will start gaining traction for at least for the next couple of years, because everybody will start wanting to move towards a light asset model. Okay, that is one of the key survival techniques one has to look at. So structurally, we need to bring down the fixed costs of the entire industry. It is not about one or two companies. Entire industry's fixed cost has to be brought down so that break-evens can happen much more faster. So these are the times when we will have to look at dramatic changes to our business models. And one of the ways by which to do is to have a lot more less fixed assets and fixed costs on a P&L, right? So as I said, truckers need to go back and look at their P&Ls 7 or 8 years back as to how do they manage with half the business that they have had last year. So if you dust back your P&Ls and your operating models, your cash flow statements, you will clearly know how much of your cost you can bear. So that is a very, very easy method for them to go back and look at their own structures and cost processes to find out where their break even is. So anything that's over and above that is not going to work in the new system. And this churn will happen for the next 1 to 2 years time. And once the demand comes back, the demand settles down, is when then whether this trend will continue to enforce itself as a continual industry shift or not is what we need to look at. But this next 2 years, if you can survive the next 2 years, I think you can survive in the business for a very long time.
Thank you so much. Kaushik, I'm going to come to you. Vijay spoke about an asset-light model and cash flow challenges. I'm going to take you to the supply side of the CV industry and how the component industry that is catering to the CV sector continues to work. Both the CV industry and the supplier, the supplier side of it are have always been labor-intensive industries and something which is always called for heavy investments. They are categorized under the heavy industries ministry. My point is, how do they adapt to the change? How do they adapt to the new normal as things come out of the shadow of lockdown? Where do you see growth coming in there, or where do you see they tapping opportunities, whatever are available?
Right. Thanks, Bhushan, for that platform. Before I start, I echo most of the points Ramki mentioned earlier. I think, just a couple of weeks ago, I was also on another webinar, where we had stalwarts from the commercial vehicle industry who were talking about recovery, right? We heard very similar numbers that this year it's going to be a 25, 30, 35% degrowth, in comparison to last year. That's number one. Second, I completely agree with Ramki, any recovery or any upward swing that we are going to see is going to happen FY22 onwards. It's not going to happen this year or maybe even early part of next year. right? So I think we are pretty much aligned there. Now, if you look at the the vendor and supplier ecosystem, I would like to, let's say, classify it as, let's say, short-term, medium-term, and long-term, perspectives. Now, if you look at the short-term perspective, for many of the small-scale vendors and suppliers, survival is the key today, right? So the point is, can OEMs support the smaller vendors and smaller component manufacturers to renegotiate, credit terms, better terms of engagement, and even leverage some of the financial support that the OEMs can offer to help them stay afloat? Because at this point in time, it's all about just staying alive, more than anything else, at least for the short term, right? So that is priority number one, in my opinion. Now, the second part of, again, the short-term perspective is it possible to prioritize vendors and supplier categories for the OEMs? That means, are OEMs today able to recognize and classify vendors and suppliers, saying, hey, these suppliers and vendors are critical. They need bigger support first. Then maybe you look at the larger conglomerates, the bigger tier one suppliers who probably have the bandwidth to manage on their own. So are OEMs today able to classify and segregate suppliers and identify the ones that need immediate support? So this is going to be the short-term perspective, right? Renegotiating better credit terms for financial companies and NBFCs, and prioritization into categories. Now, if you look at the medium term, let's say 6 to 12 months, for example, we are looking at vendor diversification. This is something that we've had the chance to speak to not only the commercial vehicle OEMs, but also other vehicle OEMs as well, across passenger vehicles and two-wheelers and three-wheelers. Are today OEMs able to diversify their supply strategy, right? Are OEMs able to de-risk their strategies by having multiple suppliers or vendors for, let's say, the same set of components, right? And that opens up a lot of opportunities. By de-risking the diversification of the supplier strategy, the OEMs are not anymore dependent on a small set of players who could be affected in some way or the other. Classic example is COVID-19 situation, right? So how diversified are the OEMs in their supply chain strategy? So that is one part of the medium-term equation. The second part of the medium-term strategy, again, is consolidation. We have seen a lot of consolidation happening on the dealership network. We have seen consolidation happening in the distributor retailer strategy, but we have seen very little consolidation happening in the supplier or the vendor category, right? So when I say consolidation, I'm talking about really the tier 2, tier 3, and maybe even tier 4 component manufacturers who manufacture very small components, for example, could be mechanical, could be plastic, could be electronic. Are they able to survive today? So if there is any form of a consolidation strategy by the tier 2, tier 1 component manufacturers to help them, again, stay afloat and survive. So some form of consolidation is needed today in the commercial vehicle supply chain industry or the supply chain ecosystem. The third part of again, the medium term perspective is a connected supply chain, right? Today, there is the need to digitize the supply chain and create the visibility down the supply chain. Right? Today, for the OEM, they know, they have very great visibility on the process. Beyond that, it has absolutely no idea. Mobility is possible only through a connected supply chain. So this forms the medium-term perspective, right? Talking about consolidation, talking about diversification, and so on. Now let's look at the long term. Long term is perspectives. The first one is investment in predictive maintenance, right? Today, every OEM is talking about with their fleet operators, whether they're large fleet operators or small fleet operators, or even individual owner, come driver operators. Predictive maintenance, diagnostics is becoming important. Got many reasons for that. One is a better efficiency. lesser downtime, and less dependency on the dealer network or the supply network to get your vehicle up and running. So predictive maintenance, investment in predictive maintenance, diagnostics, prognostics is going to be very, very important for long-term growth strategies. That's number one. Number two, there is still need for all the OEM vendor as a supplier. A vendor is not a supplier anymore, right? You have to involve vendors from the early stages of product and technology development so that they stay with them for the longer period of time. And there is a sharing of responsibility for technology development, investment in products, and so on. So that, in my opinion, is going to be the long-term strategy where vendors are looked at partners, right? And in addition to that, digitization and connectivity put together will form the growth opportunity. So this is how I see Bhushan in terms of short-term perspectives, which is all about liquidity and staying alive, to medium term, which is about consolidation and diversification, and long term, more on digitization and development of the vendor as a partner. So that's how I'm looking at it.
Kaushik, I'm going to take you back to the vendor part of the CV industry. You spoke about you're talking about consolidation, digitization. All that is okay, but when we are talking about the current times and staying afloat, how far do you think this Atmanirbhar scheme of things and the stimulus package has touched them? Because about 70 to 80% of the vendor industry, auto vendor industry in India is about SMEs, tier 2 and tier 3 suppliers. And if they can move up the ladder, they can move up the value ladder, I think this industry should be doing better.
Sorry, my line is weak. Sorry, could you repeat the last part of the question, Bhushan? I'm sorry, I lost it because of a poor
I was
line.
talking about the Atmanirbhar and the stimulus package touching the auto components vendor industry, especially the CV part of it, because many of them are the tier 2 and tier 3 players, and if they could climb up the ladder, the value ladder in the scheme of things, as you spoke about suppliers getting involved at an earlier stage of product development. How do you think? How do you see these things panning out? And what kind of products do you see coming out of the components industry in support of initiatives?
Yeah, excellent question. So there are two angles to it. One is, see, this stimulus package, reaching the tier 2, tier 3 component manufacturers is a bit of a chicken and egg situation. I don't know what is going to happen first. Is the stimulus going to reach them first and then they are going to start coming up, or are they going to start doing something on their own and then take the stimulus package to grow further? I'm not sure. It's a bit of a chicken and egg situation. Now, very clearly, some of the smaller component MSMEs, especially who are predominantly mechanical component manufacturers, right? They have been affected the most. So this is something, we had done with the SIAM and ACMA as well. I remember Ramki was also part of it. Is to how do you improve capabilities of some of the tier 2, tier 3 component manufacturers? And the low-hanging fruit, as we see, is to transition from mechanical component manufacturing to mechatronics manufacturing. So what does mechatronics mean? Simple integration of electronics, could be sensors, could be boards, or whatever it is, on their existing capability of mechanical components. Now that is going to help them transition from a low value supplier to a high value supplier, because once mechatronics come into the picture today, we are talking about a lot of applications in powertrain, in chassis, in BS6 as well. A lot of the after treatment systems involve mechatronic components. So for the really small MSME component manufacturers, transitioning from mechanical manufacturing to mechatronic manufacturing will be a very key and integral part of their growth journey.
So somewhere, Kaushik, are you pointing at a reverse globalization, or that's a process which has already begun? Because much of the
I wouldn't say that as a reverse. I agree with you. I think that goes back to the point I made earlier, which is de-risking and diversification. I wouldn't call it as much as a reverse globalization. I would rather say, stepping up of the local component manufacturers who are able to build new capabilities, right? Part of the Atmanirbhar program, of course, but also in the long term, it is only going to help them stay relevant. Because if you're just focusing on, let's say, either the plastics or the mechanical component manufacturing, you're going to get phased out very soon. It's very important to build that additional layer of capability to be able to address the growth opportunities, either from connectivity, digitization, or even electrification, right? Even for electrification, mechatronics is a stepping stone. So in more ways than one, transitioning from the pure mechanical component manufacturing to slightly more integration of electronics will play a big role in helping them stay afloat.
Thank you, Kaushik. Ramki, I'm going to quickly come to you for an answer on what Kaushik spoke about. I mean, transitioning to electronics supply. How well suited are we as an industry in India to do that? And where survival today is the challenge. Do the vendors in India have the capability or the inclination to move up the value chain?
Bhushan, the straight answer is yes. Okay. But let me substantiate on this a little bit. Okay. There are two parts to it. One is a very short-term point of view as to how to survive. Okay. But there is also an issue of structural efficiency across the value chain, right? So one of the things that we need to understand is that it's very simple. I think people in the industry know this very well. If you are doing something for 100 rupees, okay, your cash flow is that you need to pay 28% GST if you are in the commercial vehicle industry. True. And you have a 10% TDS. Okay.
Even components are taxed at 28%.
Exactly. So components, I'm talking about components. Supplier value chain is what I'm talking about, right? So you have a 28% GST and a 10% TDS. So technically, if I sell for 100 rupees, I invoice for 128 rupees, and I end up sometimes not getting the money. And even if I get the money, I get only 90 rupees. That means a 28% GST is not provided and the 10% TDS is given to the government. So for 138 rupees is my requirement. I probably will get only 90 rupees in hand. Okay. So this is what happens if you are in a supply chain where you're the tier 2 and tier 3. So cash flow is a real issue in terms of survival, right? Now, if you want to have the tier 1s will survive this because they have some margins to play with and they have some money in the bank to survive this. Not every tier 1 can do it, but some tier 1 can definitely do it. The tier 2 and tier 3 do not have the cash flow to survive this situation. Okay. The only way by which you can help these tier 2 and tier 3 survive is to ensure that the OEMs take care of the GST. Okay. It's an OEM's responsibility to pay GST to the government. The tier 1 or the tier 2 and a tier 3 is just a means and channel to collect the tax on behalf of the government and pay to the government. So honestly, automotive companies or any companies for the point of fact are not in the process of generating GST. We are all doing a free service to the government, right? We are all agents of the government to collect their GST through various channels, right? And it is technically not free. You have to appoint a chartered accountant who has to collect all the GST. You spend months of your time to put it in the format. You will get threatening messages that today is the last day to file. If you don't file, you have to pay the fine, etc., etc. Honestly, the industry is doing the government's job, technically speaking, right? So one of the key elements is that this is the biggest problem that companies in India face. If you want to really grow on the global scale and do something worthwhile in terms of innovation and other big things that we talk about, we have to reduce the burden on the supplier community and make them focused on the work that they do. One of the biggest parts that we need to do is to look at how indirect taxation can be more efficiently done. This is a much more larger issue that I'm talking about, so that cash flow of tier 2s and tier 3s are not impacted, right? So many times in the industry, we say that the interest rates are very high. Why do you borrow? You borrow a lot to actually fund your GST and tax commitments to a great extent. People who are in the business know that to a great extent, they borrow to fund government commitment, right? You don't make any money out of it, Okay, in addition to buying your raw materials, etc., etc. Okay, so there is a substantial 38% which is getting funded because you are paying the taxes to the government. Okay, this has to change for structural efficiencies to come in. If India has to be very efficient and compete globally, we need a robust taxation system which is not penalizing the taxpayers, right? The burden of tax collection should actually shift to the person who's making the money, which is the government. It is all the burden is now with the person who's an agent who's collecting and giving it. Okay, this is one big part has to change for us to become efficient across the supply chain. Okay, for us to compete globally. The second part of it is that there is and there will be a de-risking of global supply chains. Okay, there's a big, massive opportunity that is coming up there. Okay, whether we like it or not, companies will move manufacturing centers out of China and will look at new places where to invest. Now, India has to make sure, and Indian suppliers have to make sure that India is one of the best destinations for that investment to come through. Okay, when that investment comes through, the amount of opportunities is mind-boggling. Okay, now just to tell you, because we also work in this electronic sector, we very recently did something on the electronic space. So we are very sure about what is happening in that space. India imports close to $121 billion of electronic products, right? And about $57 billion of components, right? Out of the $57 billion of components, only $10 billion of components is made in India. Okay? But India exports electronic components, and these electronic components are actually electromechanical, which is what is mechatronic components. So India's capability in mechatronics is extremely well established. That is one bright spot in India's capabilities, right? Integrating mechanical to electronics, where globally people will move more towards electronics. India can definitely take to a space where you have both the mechanical skills and the electronic skills and combined it. Okay, so the answer I gave you is yes, we have a huge level of capability. What is the problem? One industry doesn't speak to the other industry. The auto component suppliers do not speak to the electronic suppliers who are sitting in India. And electronic suppliers are looking for customers within India so that they can grow together. People are not speaking to one another. This is as simple as that. This is our biggest problem. If we can collaborate, I think easily $10 billion of imports can be stopped.
Right.
Okay, and this $10 billion is an opportunity for us here in India. And there is a $750 billion of global opportunity that is sitting in. Only if we are able to put our house in order by doing some very, very simple things, we guys can go and grab or easily another $50 billion of export market. So it's given for granted.
Thank you, Ramki. And I'm going to go to Mr. Arya. As when we look at the trucking industry or the road freight transport industry, you heard what Ramki said, you heard what Kaushik said. Industry is not seeing through each other, probably failing to collaborate at certain level. Do you think that's affecting the trucking industry quite a bit, and probably a lack of coordination there?
So, see, if you're talking about the collaboration between, as Mr. Ramakrishna was mentioning, am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah. So, as he was pointing out, that was a collaboration between one kind of suppliers to the other kind of suppliers. So, we are nowhere in the picture. In fact, I was feeling quite alien to all this discussion so far, because this was going on about the manufacturing of the vehicles and the OEM and the suppliers and the components and the futuristic things, a lot of positivity also. So I was thinking whether I'm fit into this scheme of speakers.
You're a very, very vital cog in the wheel.
Yeah.
This is very much part of the ecosystem. Yes.
Yeah. And second, my caveat, my previous speakers, they have been very positive about the future, even in the present circumstances. So I may change the atmosphere a little bit.
Okay.
So with that caveat, I will start. See, I don't see things in isolation. let's not talk about a electronic manufacturer or import or whatever, or other components or truck manufacturing. We have to see the whole situation as a complete supply chain situation. And the supply chain starts from the consumer. If the
Right.
consumer has a demand, then there is a trading. The dealers will survive if there is a demand. And if the dealers have a demand, then the manufacturers will survive. And if the manufacturers are surviving, the suppliers will survive. So it's a complete situation which has to be seen. And another term which was used was short term versus long term.
Yes.
Now, this long term could be very interesting to talk, but the short term is going to call the shots. The long term will depend upon the outcome of the short term. And another point is, how short is the short term? We don't know. We are talking about something which is unpredictable. Today there is a lockdown, tomorrow there is no lockdown, day after again there is a lockdown. We are living in this kind of times. So things are not settling down. So when the things are not settling down, the short term can be a long term also. And with this kind of long term happening, I think everything will go change. Well, people say it's a new normal, but I say it's a extreme abnormal, not a normal. This new normal will kill the lot of industries.
Mr. Ari, I'm going to take you down to the fact that 70 to 80% of the goods transported in India are from the SME sector, where trucking plays a big role. So that was one of the points why I wanted to link the trucking sector with the manufacturing sector, because they are the bedrock of moving components, may it be electronics, may it be mechanical or whatever in nature, even chemicals.
Right.
I want to ask you this talk about a lot of international manufacturers coming to India, Atmanirbhar and the stimulus package. How much of that has touched the trucking industry in a way where they could think of growth? I know you started on a caveat, but is there a ray of hope?
Well, I was trying to find with a magnifying glass for a ray of hope in this 20 lakh crore package, and I couldn't see anything.
Okay.
There's not a single mention of a transport company, transporter, any supply chain component in this total package. So that is the first big disappointment. The government is not really looking at the truckers as the people who are victimized or as if they need any kind of help or not. So that is the one major dissatisfaction. And I don't think this stimulus and all that is going to help at all. Something which I have not been sharing, let me tell you, our association AITWA, we are moving the Supreme Court on this subject.
Because some days back, ITWA had come out with a circular where they advised their members to concentrate on retaining their staff, retaining their operations, rather than indulging into buying new technology or new trucks to fuel their business. So, is the situation so grim as to the trucking industry, which is a key part of freight in India, of or transport in India, overlooked so much?
See, we have to look, as I told you, we have to look at the complete picture as a whole.
Hmm.
And that advisory was not a order, because some people are disturbed also with that. Why this type of fatwa? No fatwa was. But who are we to give any fatwa to anybody?
Right.
But this industry consists of a lot of people who are not educated. As everybody talks, single track operator, and that has been defined in different ways. So maybe 70-80% are single track operators. So now these people, what is the future? I foresee a very, very bleak future, as maybe 30, 40, 50% people will be NPA out of these single track operators. Where will these people go? That will create, on one side, that will create a shortage of vehicles. On the other side, the second hand vehicle will be up for sale.
Right.
Somebody is going to buy. Because in India, people don't scrap things easily. The so-called scrappage policy is talking about 20 years old vehicle. अरे
Right.
20 years तो anything is scrap यार. उसके लिए policy की जरूरत ही नहीं है.
So,
So
Also,
Yeah.
they talk about the big transport operators trying to invade into the space that was typically consumed by the smaller operators, the medium scale and the small operators. They seeming to wipe the smaller operators out of the market. I mean, you would have heard VG Ramakrishnan just speak about how the smaller operators with one or two trucks having cleverly maintained their capping on the operating costs and managing to sustain so far. Do you think those are now being wiped out and somewhere that big fish eating the small fish kind of a scenario emerging in the trucking industry?
Absolutely no. Why? Because again, I'll quote Mr. Ramakrishna only, that the organized companies, they are having not more than 15% of their own vehicles.
Okay.
So actually, they are supporting these small truck owners. The small truck owners, they don't have any customer to themselves. Their customers are these big companies only. When I say my association, AITWA, we are an association of the transport companies. That includes the smallest to the biggest also. So our association is completely dependent on the single truck owners. We are fighting for their rights. Our writ, which is being done in the Supreme Court, that is to fight the rights of the single truck owners. We want them to survive. And the the hint which is hidden in the question is, there have been some startups which came up with a lot of foreign funds, and they were the biggest buyer in the period like 2018-19 or maybe 17 to 19, because there was a fresh feel of GST credit. So buying 1,000, 1,500, 500 vehicles together, that that changed the perception of people that things are going on a very bright side. Actually, it was not a bright side. That was where people were trying to wipe out the small players, and that didn't succeed. All those companies who have invested huge amount of money in this kind of fleet, they are struggling for survival now. They're nowhere. So I don't see any kind of such companies coming more in this market. And the market is extremely bad right now, with the excess capacity prevailing, with the expected production getting down to 30-40%. So I think the writing is on the wall. Nobody has to predict anything.
But then, Mr. Arya, the fuel price rise for the last 1 week or so, the daily rise has fuel diesel gone up by about 5 rupees per liter. I mean, nobody is not a single transporter is revolted against it, nor has any association spoken much about it. So, what kind of a fight is being put up, or is it okay we surrender to the fate of things? Is that how the trucker is today looking at the future?
30 years of history has made everybody immune. There has been so many strikes, there have been so many protests, there have been so many presentations, delegates. I don't recall a single incident where the government has rolled back the prices of diesel. So when you know you are up against a system which is totally surviving on the diesel for their management, if I am in the government, then what do I look at? There's no tax revenue, no money is coming, everybody is asking for money, everybody is asking to dole out funds for their survival. Where do I get the money? So the government is depending completely on petroleum products, that's one, and maybe on alcohol as a second. So these are the areas where the government is making money. Even if we shout, even if we do whatever we want to do, nothing is going to happen. We have got more issues on hand. We are focusing on those.
Because your association and other transport associations have been quite vocal about even driver protection in the times of COVID.
Yeah.
You've been vocal about safety. You've been vocal about security of the goods and the trucks that are flying on the road.
Yeah.
And the harassment, I think, is the least spoken about part, or it is something that is a given. The insurance extension or the insurance rebate that you have been asking for, the waiver in toll tax. Well, nothing. There's been no response to even a single of what you demanded. So why is that the case when you are the people who transport goods? I mean, if a single truck were not to operate, not a single thing would move in this country.
Yeah.
Why such
So
apathy?
you are asking me this question. You should ask this question to the Prime Minister. Because we are the victims in the system. We are not the people who are making it happen like this. And the worst part is the government is not even responding for a meeting. When we are asking at all levels, if we want to have a meeting face to face on these subjects, there is no appointments coming from any ministry, not even from the nodal ministry. I'll not name anybody, but there are no meetings taking place. We are forced to a corner. That's why ETWA is moved to Supreme Court.
What do you have to say to the constant justification from the government's end saying that they too are cash strapped? You know, that's the constant answer that we've been hearing all along the phase of the lockdown.
So what does the government want from us? The sympathy? What are they why are they in the government in that case? The government has to govern in all circumstances. When the economy is booming, then also, and when we are as low as the present times, government just cannot get out of by saying we are cash trapped. You have got a lot of other methods to generate funds. Why don't you do that? Why you kill a particular industry, which is the backbone of the country?
Right.
I'm going to go to Mr. Patwardhan. Mr. Patwardhan, I'm going to touch upon a recent meeting where it was decided that you would rather take your buses and park them at the RTO in a week's time if you don't get a toll tax waiver. So Arya has frankly painted a dark picture about the trucking industry. Where do you think the bus operator industry stands? Because the buses, there's the social distancing norm which may not touch the cargo on a bus, on a truck, but it is touching the operator efficiency and the ability to carry commuters on a bus. So what kind of picture do you see emerging as we come out of the lockdown for the bus industry?
So, am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. So, first and foremost, we are almost 95% under lockdown for last about 3 months. So, only not even 5% buses are on the road and they are running. Buses which are going to some of the manufacturing sectors or companies, or some of the buses are being utilized to transfer this migratory labor. Apart from that, everybody is under lockdown. Last 3 months, there is absolutely zero income for everybody. We have also been writing to various levels of the government, and we have not received even acknowledgement. So it is that bad. And like exactly like Mr. Arya said, that 20 lakh crore or whatever is that number, that is debatable, monetary, fiscal. So we don't understand all the technicalities. We only know that there is zero support for any kind of transport. Absolutely zero support. And under the circumstances wherein people today are not understanding the gravity of the situation. The gravity is such that even for manufacturing industry like auto, when there is no demand, what we are discussing about? If we are not buying buses, truckers are not buying trucks, then what kind of vendor development, what kind of manufacturing all of us are talking about? So unless that demand goes up, nothing is going to move. And that demand is under serious challenge. On one side, operators are almost on the verge of dying. Many of them are already in ICU. Today, it is not visible because of only moratorium, and presently at least government is not asking us to renew any documents or pay immediate taxes, etc. The moment it starts, it is going to have tremendous bad impact on the entire industry. So that is why we said that in any case, if you ask us to pay taxes, pay insurance, pay EMIs, and when that time comes, we'll not be able to come on road and will not be able to operate. So why keep on taking that burden on us? So let us government take that burden. So we'll surrender buses to government. Then government will take care of taxes, EMIs, insurance, everything they need to take care of because vehicles are in their custody. On one side, we have been forced to stay under lockdown for 3 months, and many state governments are not even giving waiver for the tax. How can this happen? When you are forcing us to stay under lockdown, you are saying your businesses will be shut, you will not have income, but you will pay us taxes. I mean, it is ridiculous. Banks are asking interest on loan. So when your partner's business is shut, you keep on enjoying your profits. How can this happen? In insurance, there may not be having any third-party claim from buses, parking lots and garages. So what third-party claim insurance companies are going to get? But extension of policy for that amount has not been done, and insurance companies are refusing to extend that. So under this circumstances, how do government expect us to survive? And if we do not survive, then how students will go to school, how employees will go to their factories, and how without demand manufacturers will manufacture buses and truck chassis. So this gravity, once this starts, is going to hit everybody. Until that time, unless we prepare ourselves, it is going to be a chaotic situation.
I was part of the meeting where you spoke to the transport minister, where you subtly put your demands and aired your difficulties. I mean, the difficulties faced by your sector. Has there been a positive response to it? He said, okay, we are that was the time when you were in complete lockdown, and he spoke about starting bus operations, starting public transport operations. But was that more inclined towards the PSU part of it? I mean, the STUs part of it, and not the private bus sector. How is the division working as things come out of the lockdown?
See, both, whether it is public operator or private operator, both are in serious trouble. A public operator contributes to less than 10% of the vehicle. 90% of the movement happens through private operators. So in terms of passenger trips, private operator every day undertakes 30 crore passenger trips. Government operators undertake 6.5 crore passenger trips. All railway, wherein you have ministry, you have separate budget, all of them put together carry 2.3 crore passenger trips per day. Out of that, 70 lakh are only from Mumbai. All airlines put together carry only 1.5 crore of the passenger trips per day. So this is the quantum which we are discussing about. So 30 crore on one side, which is totally being ignored. 6.5 crore on other side, which is partially being ignored. Railways, I am sure they will survive because government will fully back them. Airlines are also struggling, but their quantum is less, but their voice is heard more because all VIPs travel by air. But people, those who are dependent on public transport, which is 90% of the people in this country are dependent on public transport. Only 16 crore people have their personal vehicles. So what would happen to balance people? How they are going to travel? Nobody is thinking about this. And this is going to become serious day by day. That's why we said, might as well you handle the entire situation and you manage the services, because we will not be able to manage services under social distancing, where city buses will have tremendous problem under social distancing to operate on both sides. On one side, on demand side, and on second side, supply side. So if your economics, which is dependent on 100% excess utilization capacity, so in a bus which carries normally 44 seats and 16 standees, so 60 people, which carries more than 100 people during peak time. And in spite of that, STUs are losing heavily. Private operators are barely surviving. That is the situation. And when you are bringing down my capacity from 44 to 22, so I am actually coming down from 100 to 22.
Right.
So last year's DTC's loss was 3,500 crores.
Right.
Best loss was more than 1,000 crores.
Right.
So how much this loss will go up and how government will fund them? Under public-private partnerships also, we have not been paid for last 3 months. So if government wants us to be Atmanirbhar, they should start from their own self.
Right.
So whatever direction government is taking as far as starting of the public transport is concerned, we have no clue whatsoever. When we are going to start, we don't know. Whether we are going to start with social distancing, what kind of social distancing norms, nobody knows. Everybody is in dark. That's why we requested Maharashtra government to form a task force, which they have formed. But till date, there is not even a single meeting. About 8-10 days back, it was formed, but there is not even a single meeting. So urgency and gravity of the situation is yet to be realized by all government machinery. That is only I can say.
As we come, Bhushan, as we come to the last few minutes.
Yes.
Yes,
I will ask a few
just one question.
questions, Mr. Patwardhan.
Yeah.
I want to touch upon whether the bus industry is caught in the state versus central government kind of a fight, or kind of a difference of origins or difference of thinking, where the state government is thinking something else for this industry and the central government is thinking something else for the industry in terms of taxation, because probably state government has different ways of taxing the bus industry. The state government has the interstate movement of buses. Is that all making the whole story more complicated?
Absolutely. Actually, the purpose of having Motor Vehicle Act is to have seamless movement of people. But unfortunately, this being a subject which is under concurrent list, so most of the things as far as passenger transport is concerned are defined by states. Taxation is 100% with the states. Many permit conditions are with the states. Only one permit, which is All India permit, which is issued by central government. So to restrict entries of All India permit buses, state governments are using one tool, which is taxation.
Right.
So taxation is tremendous on this industry. 5% to 17.5% of our money goes only towards taxation, depending on state and type of vehicle and multiple reasons. So if you are crossing 3 states or 4 states, you end up paying something like 20 lakh to 30 lakh rupees tax per year. So, which is unheard of. There is no taxation globally in many countries. If you tell them that public transport, what is the tax on public transport, they will laugh at you, because there is no tax on public transport. So here in a country wherein poor people are traveling by public transport, which is taxed highest, and we say we are a country of poor, and wherein government is working towards the betterment of poor, upliftment of poverty, etc. And that sector is taxed highest. So that is the situation. So states have a lot of say in it. And because of this isolation of islands, which is supposed to be not created in the purpose of Motor Vehicle Act, has been lost totally. So we are working under isolation of islands, and every state is coming up with their own taxation, with their own permit, with their own social distancing norms, and starting of the services.
And COVID has added to it, where each state is thinking differently on how to tax or how to give a relief.
Correct.
So, thank you so much.
Gentlemen, I'm afraid we are a little over time, but I would want passing comments from each one of you all in terms of what is it that you're looking at from the government when it comes to the immediate present. Something that will make a big difference and ensure that the CV industry gets back to going in the top gear.
Yeah, how does it shift gears is something that seems to baffle everyone. So we would quickly want an input on how the industry could.
Let's start with you, Mr. Prasanna.
Yeah, we could start with you, Mr. Patwardhan.
Okay. So first and foremost, those taxes which are quite heavy, they will have to waived off for a year at least by all the states. Secondly, taxes on diesel are also quite heavy. So for public transport to survive, government will have to, particularly I'm talking about city transport. So government will have to give diesel at concessional rate, because you cannot increase ticket fare, which is in the hands of government, and government cannot increase ticket fare by twice, thrice. So that is the requirement. Second is banks should waive off interest during moratorium period, and they should not only waive off interest, but they will have to give reschedulement for entire period of the loan. And third is insurance will have to give additional period for the same policy with the same amount, and they should not increase their insurance premium for at least next 2 years. So these three are most important demand. And one additional demand which we are expecting to happen is that salaries of people, those who are registered under ESIPF, should be paid by government, and then they can get it recouped over a period of 3 to 5 years. Thank you.
Right. Mr. Arya?
Okay. I think the only advice which I can give the government right now is that every minister should be asked to be personally in touch with that relevant industry to discuss, to understand the issues. Everyone has got issues. So people are, moving from here and there. But Prasanna is a very good friend. He has same problem as we have. Minister is not going to listen, then who is going to listen? The government has to be responsive, and just by saying that we are cash strapped, everything else will be solved. That is not happen. Everything will collapse otherwise. So I'm not going into the nitty-gritty of, because that is included in my Supreme Court writ, what all is required for my industry. But my request to the government is every minister should be involved with the concerned industry for which he is appointed.
Right. Kaushik?
I fully agree with what Mr. Patawardhan has mentioned, especially on taxation and the banking sector. Just to add to what Mr. Patawardhan said on banking sector, in fact, today there is still a big gap between what the RBI has mandated, rather not mandated, recommended, what the interest rates the banks are actually offering on the ground. It's a huge difference there. I think there needs to be some form of a reconciliation there between the RBI mandate and what the interest rate offered by the banks are, because that's only going to help the operators. So I fully agree with what he said.
Right. VG?
Ramki, you're on mute.
You'll have to unmute yourself. Yeah.
So on an overall level, I think number one is that demand has to come back, right? I think that's a fundamental element that one needs to look at. And demand can come back in 2-3 ways. One is people going out and spending, and second is government incentivizing people to spend, right? So that's one part of it. If demand comes back, many of the other associated problems will more or less get addressed as part of it. So on a very, very broad level, number one is that from a supplier community and the trucking industry, there are many opportunities that I spoke about. One could be international markets, global scale, redefining the value chain and all of that. From a trucking industry and a bus industry operating at the local level, there's only one piece I can say to this industry is that the government can do only certain elements, right? All these elements that we spoke about currently has been part of the business model for a very, very long period of time. Interstate movement of goods and passengers have been heavily taxed. There has been a lot of roadblocks towards that. Diesel has always been charged very highly in this country, right? Honestly, we should be selling diesel and petrol at 30-35 rupees. We are selling it at 75-80 rupees right now. Okay, this is nothing new in terms of what is happening. Only change is that there has been no income that is coming through for operators, but the entire cost structure is sitting out there. So first and foremost is that the business model of companies will have to undergo a transformation, right? And the second part is that, look at, I come from Chennai, so my Hindi is not that very good, but the Atmanirbhar scheme of things applies to every single industry, right? In this entire conversation that I have been listening to, not only in the trucking and the bus segment, but also across many, many industry segments, is that everybody is putting up a wish list in front of government and expect that all the wish lists will be fulfilled, right? But nowhere are these industries or industry bodies or sectors willing to take some amount of responsibility among themselves in terms of how to overcome the situation, right? So the bus operators and the truck operators have been in the existence for a very, very long time. How have their associations and how have their bodies prepared their own set of members to face uncertain future? There has been no talk about what they will have to do. So Atmanirbhar program also has to start from within. you cannot expect the banks to provide you with interest-free or zero interest loans, because there are other business people who have borrowed money there to finance people in the SME segment. So they don't have a moratorium. Finance companies don't have a moratorium. So one man's food is another man's poison. So you will survive, but you will kill someone else to survive this. So this is the current situation that we are in. So one of the things that I would like to leave behind is that government has a lot to do. I agree with quite a bit of it. In fact, I spoke about how industries are having to borrow to give government taxes. That has to stop. But the industries have to figure out their own ways to ensure that their members are able to go through certain uncertain future times, just like the COVID, right? These are black swan events. The industry bodies need to go back to the drawing board and see what is it that they can do in these kind of times. So with that, I close my remarks.
Ramki, somewhere you remind me of the saying that in the long run, we are all dead. I don't know how much of that applies to us. Ashish, do we have any time for Q&As?
I'm afraid we are terribly over time. So we will maybe get back to the participants from their questions and answer them on email. We'll have to conclude it at that. Thank you so much. From what we gather is,
thank you so much for all of you for joining us.
On the industry and the government, and there is no taking away from the fact that all the stakeholders have their bit to do. So thank you so much for participating wholeheartedly and being so frank. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you to all the
Thank you, Ashish.
participants
Thank you.
for listening in patiently. Thank you so much.